Good afternoon and welcome to Policing TV. I am truly delighted here in Staffordshire to be joined by former Staffordshire Police Chief Constable John Giffard, CBE QPM. John, real pleasure to meet you and to have you recording something with us for Policing TV.
Nice to be here.
You had a career in policing that began, I believe, back in 1973, when you joined as a police constable, a probationer, here in Stafford, the very town that we are currently recording in. What led you to wish to join the police?
The desire to do something that wasn't sitting behind an office desk, and I wasn't particularly keen on the army, which is what my parents tried to drive me towards. And while at university, there was an outing to Hampshire Police offered to undergraduates by the force, and I went on that and got quite impressed by that. Then I said I wanted to join the police. My parents got quite agitated about that because in those days, old attorneys didn't join the police. And I was geared up for that, and my father went to see Arthur Rees, then the Chief Constable here, who was Welsh Rugby International and a fairly famous Chief Constable around the country. And Arthur Rees, being cunning, said, "I'll take him for a day." And he sent me out on the motorway for a day with a sergeant, sadly dead now, Dave Court. And that convinced me that's what I wanted to do. And the more everybody saw what a bad idea it was, the more I wanted to do it.
So your parents' discouragement actually was a further encouragement to you then?
Yeah, absolutely right, yeah.
What? So that first day you were impressed by, and you were then determined to join. You joined as a probationer here in Stafford. What are your early memories? Did you ever regret the decision, or did you continue to know it was for you?
I never regretted the decision. There have been times when I felt pretty awful about it, but I've never seriously regretted it. I always felt I could get to the top. Whether I could get to the top in Staffordshire was always a moot point, but everything happened in the end to fall right for me, very fortunately. And we've had a few scrapes and shaves on the way, as one does, but I had a wonderful time.
You're a long-term resident of Staffordshire. I get the impression that Staffordshire is sort of beating in your heart.
My family have been here for 800 years, so I was the 29th to inherit the house, and my son has gone there now to the 30th. And we're worried we may not make the 31st.
And we could, of course, focus on the house that you have lovingly restored, and we'll put in the notes some links through to that. In terms of your policing career, so starting in Stafford, what do you recall of those early years? Perhaps, good points and less good.
Well, less good points included being called youth everywhere. All the public always called you youth. You're at youth as you walk down the streets.
In uniform?
In uniform, yeah.
So you were a uniformed officer?
Uniformed officer walking down the streets, checking the doors were locked on all the shops, which struck me as a bit childish, but there we were. And if there was a shop found burgled, you were called back off nights to justify it to the chief superintendent the following morning.
So you had a patch. Your responsibility, yes. What went on in that patch?
Absolutely. I had a very good first sergeant and a first shift that I got on very well with, some of whom I still see, and I loved it. And once you get under your skin, then you're off.
So you increasingly knew that it was right for you, yeah. And you had early on a determination to play a leading role, and so you had your sights set, did you, on the most senior ranks, even at an early stage?
Absolutely, yes, and one particular senior rank,
which was
here.
Oh, right, yes. So you very early on were determined, yeah, that you were going to be the Chief Constable of Staffordshire.
Plan A.
Okay. How did that go down with your colleagues? Did you make that known to your colleagues? And how did it go down?
Well, generally speaking, welcome back. We know you've got to go out. In those days, you had to go out. You don't now have to do that. when you go out to another force at or above chief superintendent level. And I did that and came back at the right time.
Yeah, so we moved forward. You'd progressed through the ranks to, I think, Chief Superintendent prior to going to North Yorkshire as an Assistant Chief Constable. And you went then to North Yorkshire, I think, for about 5 or 6 years before. What do you recall coming back? So you applied. Did you apply as Assistant Chief Constable or Deputy Chief Constable?
We didn't have Deputy Chief Constable by then. We got rid of them, and they were all, unless they'd been deputies before they changed the rules, we were ACC.
Oh yes, I remember that now.
ACC designate.
Yes, I remember. Because there was a period where the rank of, from memory, Chief Inspector was removed, Chief Superintendent.
Well, Patrick Sheehy,
that was right.
Advising Ken Clark as Ken Secretary.
The Sheehy Review of the 1990s.
Which everybody thought was a bit of a nonsense. He wanted to get rid of ranks, and we realised quite quickly that Chief Inspector in particular was a fairly critical rank and we didn't want to lose. So it got brushed away eventually.
So as ACC designate, you
were qualified.
You were qualified.
You counted, but the inspector would give you a tick for that.
Yes, and at that time there was a process where you needed to go. You could not be promoted to Chief Constable within the same force, correct. And you could not, or it was very difficult to get promoted from ACC to Chief Constable. Yes. I think it did happen occasionally, but extremely rarely. Very rare, yes. So what do you recall of the application process and the interview process for Staffordshire? Was it a shoo-in?
No, it wasn't. They took it seriously. The police authority took it very seriously. I'm sure about that. And there were a number of good people shortlisted, a number of good applicants. I think there were about 11 applicants for it.
11?
Yeah, 9 or 11.
Goodness. Now, in present-day terms, that would not happen.
I know.
So these days, you're in a way lucky to have 2,
that's right.
But 11 at that time.
I think 11 of us, yeah. And several of whom became chiefs elsewhere. So the good quality of competition was there. But I did know the county very well. I served all round it, which was one of my predecessors' intents, I think. He made sure that I was all over the place. They're doing different jobs to gather the experience to come. And there were some questions that clearly I could answer better than most people because I knew what was going on historically. And that's quite helpful. And when Bernard Price, the clerk, came back into the room and said, "Mr. Giffard, please," all my dreams came true.
Came back in the room? So were all 11 of you in the room at the time?
Well, there were only 4 shortlisted.
4 shortlisted.
So the 4 of us in the room waiting, bated breath. And the others just said, well, we knew that was going to happen.
So in a way, cause for celebration. This had been your career lifetime ambition.
Yeah, correct.
You rejoined the force then as Chief Constable.
Yeah.
You had some changes that you needed to make. What were, do you recall, the first things that you did?
Well, I've got a piece of paper somewhere here saying my plan for the first 3 weeks is, and these were all the things I needed to do in the first 3 weeks.
So you had a plan.
One of which was that David Arkle, I think it was a consultant who'd been employed by the force to help with the restructuring of the divisions. He sadly died very shortly after doing this bit of work for us. And he said to me, "You've got to get rid of X." I won't say who X was, but anybody who's listening now will know exactly who X was. And you probably have to get rid of Y as well, which we did in a variety of different ways. And the whole thing then gave me an opportunity to bring in new, bright ACCs. We didn't always recruit from outside the force, and we didn't always recruit the brightest and the best, because my predecessor probably preferred to have some steady eddies in the jobs who weren't going to rock any boats. Rocking boats was not a good thing in Staffordshire in those days. Whereas we wanted to rock boats.
Change to your top team very early on.
Very early on, yes.
And
with one exception, that David Rowley, who became my deputy after this transition had taken place, was long-serving ACC, and he'd been my traffic inspector when I was on traffic. Absolutely top class, and died sadly 4 days after retiring. but was the young ACCs used to say, "We're going for a history lesson," as they went into his office, and he was very good at that. And if he said, "Chief, you might want to rethink that," it was worth rethinking.
You listened to him. Yes.
Before you made a really big mistake.
Yes. The top team, I remember. So one of the things that you that I mugged up on prior to our conversation here being recorded, you recorded a podcast with the current chief, Chris Noble.
Yeah.
That Policing TV we're aiming to republish with permission. We have your permission, for which many thanks. And you were mentioning there the need to have individuals in your team that didn't simply reflect the skills that you and knowledge that you yourself have. Expand on that for us, if you would.
Well, I'm not very technically minded. I'm not very good at technical stuff, so I needed somebody who was good at technical stuff, and I needed somebody who was particularly strong on the HR side. And I got that in David Swift in particular. And we needed to move things fairly fast, and we needed the right people to do that. And the first thing Steve Green did was he sat down and said, how many people we've got committing crime regularly. And he worked out from that we had 200 people committing 30% of our detected crime. We worked around the work when we knew who the people were. They'd been detected, and we found that of the 100,000 or so crimes that we detected in the year, something like 50% were committed by just 200 people. And getting those 200 people spread around the county, not always the same 200, because you're looking at something, and they would then produce a much more focused approach on dealing with volume crime. And that's what we did.
So focusing on the individuals in this case. Correct. That were most likely to yield results. Correct. For you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you were Chief Constable for a total of 10 years, 7 years original tenure, yeah. Different these days, but then renewed for 3 years. So a total of 10 years. And in that time, my understanding is that every single murder was detected. So
I think that's technically right, although there was one big case appealed, and the case was then sent back to.
Okay, but in the main, a very strong track record.
Correct.
And from going from third third bottom.
Yeah, 39 out of 43.
39 out of 43.
40 out of 43.
40 out of 43. The league table, if we can call it. Yes. That. You took Staffordshire, and I do recall this from personal experience from afar, to the very top. We've talked about having a plan. We also, off camera, talked a little bit about leadership. Yeah. So tell us something about your leadership philosophy.
Our leadership philosophy was based on people. The whole of policing is all about people. And I was determined that the people would be well treated in and out of the organisation. And that we were a family force. A lot of people in this force have parents and cousins and uncles in the force. And we're a big family. And my memory for names and faces is quite remarkable occasionally, and surprises me even. And I think that the management of people is critical to all this, and that's always been my mantra for all leadership issues.
So in the last day,
leading by example.
We'll come back to the leading by example in a moment, perhaps. But in my last day here in Staffordshire, I've mentioned to a couple of people that I was going to have the honour of speaking with you. And a lady, Jackie, on the reception mentions to me how she knew you from some probably 30 years ago now, yeah. Something like that, and remembered you very fondly. And another mentions to me that you had this almost photographic memory for collar numbers. And you'd see somebody's collar number, even if you hadn't met them before, and still know who they were.
Spooky. Really
It's
spooky.
do you remember that as being a particular talent of yours?
Well, I was only yesterday, having been retired for 18 years, I went into the hospital car parking department at Stafford Hospital to get a token for getting out of the place. And the chap there was a sergeant's son who had been in the Falklands, and I told him where I met him first, which was at Stone when he was PC. And I told him he'd been in the Falklands because he was wearing a Falklands badge when he was on uniform. I remember asking him what it was the first time I'd seen one.
So quite a memory there. And
I'm staggered. I find people. I walk down the street and I see people I haven't seen for 20 years. Well, like this chap yesterday, and I just know who they are straight away. And I know, in many cases, I know their collar numbers. And I don't know why it happens. It drives my wife around the twist because I know all the telephone numbers. The numbers seem to resonate with me.
And that's been throughout your life, has it? That's not a learned skill.
No, not a learned skill. That's spooky.
Now, in terms of the engaging with people, you mentioned before we started the camera that the Mars bar.
Yeah.
Tell us about the Mars bar, if you would.
Well, when I went to Bursum as superintendent, I thought that I bought a big box of Mars bars, 48 or 50 of them, and if somebody did a good piece of work, didn't have to be something going up to a commendation of the chief's bravery commendation or anything like that. Just a good piece of work, locked up a regular villain, done something good, a traffic incident, looked after people carefully, whatever. They go to Mars bar through the post. If they're on duty, I give them Mars bar in person. If not, they got in a brown envelope. And without anything in it, they just knew it from me. And somebody wrote a poem about it eventually. And I've just handed the poem in because I found it the other day. And
yes, it's so I have it now in front of me. So I'll read the first few lines. So this I understand was presented to you as a memento.
Somebody sent this to me. I don't know who the author is. I know it was typed out. The original was typed out on the teleprompter at Stone in the middle of the night. That's all I know.
So it says, have you heard of the system for thanking the boys? It appears like Christmas, opening your toys. Taking of prisoners rewarded with gifts. A Mars bar is issued for effecting arrests. Mm-hmm. And there are 4 further verses, which remarkable recognition of the...
Everybody knew about it. Everybody knew about it. The reason I stopped it was for 2 reasons. I found as a chief superintendent, I couldn't be certain I was hearing everything that's going on all around the division. And I didn't want to find myself giving out Mars bars to people who didn't deserve it. Whereas as a superintendent, I knew what was going on more closely. And it would be even worse as an ACC up in North Yorkshire, because it's so far to hear everything. But I just knew then I probably had to stop it.
There is so much more we could talk about your career as a police officer. I just want to acknowledge that when you, I believe, at the end of your time as Chief Constable, you then went on secondment to the Home Office, and you worked on a review that was looking at merging forces. Now, I suggest we come to that in our next video, but in terms of your career and your time here in Staffordshire, and also relatively briefly in North Yorkshire, for the time being, John Giffard, thank you very much indeed.